Hey guys, welcome everyone. I'm Lucas, co-founder and CEO of Widgetbook, and today I'd like to talk to you about design systems. With Widgetbook, we've already been helping over 2,000 Flutter teams to build their own custom design systems, and I wanted to use this opportunity today to share the biggest lessons that we learned throughout this journey. First of all, I'd like to start with a question. Who in this audience already heard about Widgetbook before? Great, basically everyone. And who already used Widgetbook sometime before? Great. And who is using Widgetbook in their current project? Okay, still a lot of hands. Great. For those of you who have not heard about Widgetbook yet or have not used it yet, primarily we are building an open source package. And on top of that, we built a cloud solution as well. And with this product set, we've been featured by Google's Flutter team as experts for both component-driven development, but also for UI reviews. So you might have seen that we've lately, a few weeks ago, we've been featured as Package of the Week. And basically, besides building useful tools for Flutter developers, we are really community-focused as well. We are always organizing the after party after the last day of Fluttercon. So if you'd like to join our after party again this year, it's going to happen on Friday. We have a sign-up link which you can find downstairs at our booth. But enough talk about party for now. We're here to learn something, right? So the goal of today is we'd like to learn best practices about how you can either start to build your own design system from scratch, or also how you can improve your already existing design system. And the first part of this talk is going to be about how you can set up your own design system. The second part of this talk is going to be about how you can maintain your design system. And afterwards, I'm happy to tackle any question that you might have. First of all, let's set up our design system. How we usually start is not with the developers, but actually with the designers. So usually we should start building a design system in a design tool. What we saw predominantly, everyone nowadays is using Figma. Quick show of hands, which team is not using Figma? Okay, what are you using?
We don't have a designer right now.
Oh, okay, so nothing at all. So you're just building straight into Flutter. Exciting. But basically everyone else should usually be using Figma, and I can highly recommend that. And if you want to improve your team's design system setup in Figma, what I would really recommend you to check out is a free course from Figma. And for those who are not using Figma yet, please feel free to share with your team. It's a 2-hour course. It's really well made. If you don't want to go through this 2-hour course, I have the key learnings summed up for you. First of all, what's really important is that a design system is not just a UI kit. It's way more than that. So in a design system, you do not only have your components and styles. In the end, your design system also includes what kind of processes you're using, what are the principles that you want to use with your team, what's the governance, and also it covers documentation. After that, what's also important that design systems, while they initially take some effort, in the long run, they accelerate product development a lot. So especially if you're building an app for an established business where you are really sure, okay, my app is going to stay around for at least a year from now on, or maybe even more, a design system really makes sense. In the beginning, it's some weeks and that you have to invest into it, but long term, it definitely pays off and accelerates product development even. And then it's really important that you align your team across the different disciplines. So a design system should never be owned just by design. It should really live through your entire organization. And you should try to include other stakeholders in this process as soon as possible. So usually it's starting with design, yes, great, but you as developers, you should also be included very early on to make sure that you also have this sense of ownership for the design system. Once the designers build the design system in Figma, it's the question about, okay, how do you as a developer can get started to actually benefit from this design system and take over. And Figma lately, so now already a year and a half ago, launched the dev mode, and that has proven to be really successful for most of the teams that we have worked with. In the past, you might be familiar with tools like Zeppelin, for example, that helped a lot on that regard. You can still use Zeppelin, like, no offense, but if you're using Figma already, just use the dev mode. It is working really well. For those of you who are not familiar with dev mode, what does it even mean? It's basically a mode inside Figma that is suited especially for developers, where your designers can mark certain sections as ready for development. And then you as a developer basically have this one page that you need to look at, where you know exactly, okay, perfect, these are the things that are actually changed now, that are ready for me to build, and you don't need to be overwhelmed with this entire Figma file. We don't really know what's going on, because in the end, it's owned by designers and not by you. So Figma Dev Mode, definitely a great tool for developers here. And now enough talk about the designers. Probably in this audience, we are mostly developers. Maybe show of hands, who here is not a developer? Okay, and who here is a designer? Nice. And the others are managers, I assume? Yeah, kinda. Okay, nice. But as we see, like, more than 99% are developers. That's why let's talk about the stuff that's actually important for us developers. Let's talk about how we can build our own design system in Figma, in Flutter, so how we can take the journey from Figma to Flutter. First of all, the first question that we tackle usually is, okay, how do we organize our design system? And you can ask yourself a couple of questions. First of all, is like, are you building a single app, or are you building multiple apps? If you're just building one app for your design system, what you can do, it's just the easiest way usually, you just create a local design system module inside your already existing repo. If you build multiple apps, it might make sense for you to use a dedicated Flutter package repository, and you then import it into each app via the pubspec YAML file. Or your team chose a monorepo. And monorepo is something that gained a lot of popularity lately. So let's say most of the customers or most of the teams that we're working together with over the past 2 years, most of them chose now a monorepo approach, which is also a great approach to take. And in a monorepo, you would basically have multiple related apps and also packages that are living in the same Git repository. Also, definitely valid choice you can make. Once you have your system organized and you know how to start, you usually do not start with the components straight away. You first start with the style foundations. And here there's one definition that we have to give now, and that is tokens. So inside Figma, your designers define tokens, and tokens are in the end abstract reusable values that define your design system. And in the end, depending on the complexity of your design system, you may even have a hierarchy of tokens. So it really varies on the scalability that you have. And in the end, tokens can be implemented inside Figma using variables or styles. I would always encourage your designers, if you can somehow influence their choice, to use variables. Because then you can basically easily support a different hierarchy of tokens. So then you can, for example, have primitive tokens, you could have semantic tokens, and then also component-specific tokens. It just gives you a lot more flexibility and allows you to scale easier as you go. Again, that is basically the way the designers are defining it in Figma. And we as developers, we can then take these tokens. Usually that's the view that we're seeing. It's a view that we are familiar with from Figma, where you basically have the token set organized. And just for simplicity here, we are only using primitive tokens and semantic tokens here. And these tokens currently include, so we see colors, we can see spacing, typography, and also radius. And what we can then do is we can start by generating a Flutter class for the theme and its radius tokens. And in this case here right now, the design system radius are the primary tokens, which are defined as constant values. And from there, we can then basically continue implementing the other tokens until we can finally compare all of the tokens together into a theme class. And what's really important here that we try to match, and we will see it in another tip quite very, very soon. We always try to really mirror the naming from Figma to Flutter so that it's very easy for everyone to know what's going on. So that you do not, so basically never try to invent new names for something. Just stick, if your designers make a good choice, just stick to the names that your designers provide you with. And then once we have our style foundation in Flutter, it's time for us now to build our components and catalog our design system. And here I can highly recommend you, obviously, to use Widgetbook. It's free, it's open source, it's really well maintained, and usually in these talks, I go through the entire setup process and basically explain you exactly how you can set up Widgetbook. But that is something I want to skip for this talk. So if you're interested in that, we have a bunch of documentation about it. If you have specific questions, I'm really happy to help all of you with the setup. But to save some time and give you more hands-on tips, we save the setup part and go immediately into an example. And I would like to give you an example of an open source design system that is made by the wonderful people of Zebra. It's an amazing design system that I can really recommend you guys to check out. As it's open source, you can not only use it yourself to basically preview the Widgetbook there, but you can also access the code and basically see exactly how they set it up. And first of all, what you can do with Widgetbook, you can see here on the left side, you have a library of all of the different widgets, all of the different components that you're using inside your app. And you then have the chance to preview each and every widget in isolation. So in this case, for example, the label, or in the end, the button. And you can basically click through all these different widgets that you're using in your design system. And you can then use our knobs to preview each and every widget in isolation in all its different configurations. So in this case, we can dynamically override the text. We can test different states, disabled, enabled. We can go through different sizes that we have, and we could change the color types here, or we could go from leading icons to also trailing icons. So we can basically test each and every configuration of our widgets to make sure they work exactly as we expect. And beside knobs, we also have add-ons. And our add-ons allow us to test our widgets not only against widget-specific parameters, but against global parameters of our app. So we can test different device sizes, different text scale factors, light and dark mode. We can even, in this case, Zebra chose even a very sophisticated setup where you can also test different accessibility types. So it's really versatile, and you always have the chance to also extend it. So you can basically choose from a big variety of knobs and add-ons that are already pre-configured by our team and our Widgetbook community, but you can also easily extend so that you can also define your own custom knobs and custom add-ons as well. Now is something that's quite important to me, as I mentioned before, mirror the Figma naming to Flutter. And here we deliberately chose a structure where Widgetbook closely aligns with Figma. In Widgetbook, we have use cases, while in Figma you have variants. So Figma uses variants in the end to allow designers to design all different use cases for a component, and the equivalent to variants in Widgetbook, therefore, are use cases. In Figma, you have variables, and these variables, they allow designers to, in the end, store reusable values that can be applied to various design properties. For example, theming for colors or spacing. And developers can then match that in Flutter with theme data. In Figma, you have variable modes. And these variable modes, they allow designers to represent different contexts of our designs. And you don't even need to create multiple frames for every context that you need. Exactly how in Widgetbook, you can have add-ons. Or in Figma, you have component properties that allow your designers to communicate which parts of a component can be changed. For example, a string. And in Widgetbook, you have knobs. So it really allows you to match Figma and Flutter very closely together. Once you achieve that, once you basically follow the same naming consistently, the question is, okay, how do we structure our components? And here I would really encourage you to follow the atomic design methodology, because this structure in the end just makes it very easy to navigate and also to scale your code base. And atomic design basically starts, or the name suggests already, with atoms. And an atom, in this case, is a primary button. So it's basically the smallest possible form of a widget that you can have. Then we have molecules. And molecules, in the end, consist of multiple atoms. In this case, this counter widget here, for example. Then you have organisms. And organisms consist of multiple molecules. In this case, we have this basket card. Then we have entire pages. And in this case, we have a basket screen that consists of multiple organisms. So that's the way I would really encourage you to think about your design system. And in the end, it's really important that you document everything. And here, again, gave the example of Zeta here. So documentation really ensures reusability and clarity. And you can include documentation in Widgetbook, like Zeta does. Or what you can also do is you can also store higher level guidance in other documentation tools. So we've seen customers using Notion, or we've seen customers using specific design system documentation tools like Zeroheight or Storybook as well. Also works. And we already saw that I included pages into the design system. And I did it deliberately for a reason. Because while Widgetbook is already perfect for just the components, you can really extend the benefits of Widgetbook, this building in isolation and basically testing and tweaking with knobs and add-ons to make sure that all the different configurations work really well. You can extend it also to app-specific widgets and also to entire pages. And one of our users, and it's actually a great story because most of the users of Widgetbook are like larger teams. But Mark is the founder of Casa de Casa. He's a solo entrepreneur, and he's the only guy developing the app, and he's using Widgetbook for everything. So he basically ditched the emulators. he's only using Widgetbook, and he builds all the widgets in Widgetbook, but also all the pages. And Mark lately published a video. It's a 20-minute demo of his workflow, how he has been using Widgetbook. And in this demo, he's showing how he saves 1 hour a day by using Widgetbook. And again, Mark is only this one-person army. So if you're working together in a team, you will save even more time. Then, if you have built your design system locally, I would highly encourage you to share it with other stakeholders. So we were talking about alignment across other stakeholders before, that it's really important to do it. And I would highly encourage you to not only use it with developers, but share it with your team. Who are the stakeholders that we usually see are benefiting from it? Usually it's designers, it's product management, and it's QA testers. And the question is, okay, how do I share it? You would host your Widgetbook, and here you have multiple options. You could easily host it, for example, on an S3 bucket or your own infrastructure. The benefit is you already have that infrastructure set up, and your legal team will be like, hey, it's definitely secure, but you have the issue that you have to maintain it yourself, you have to set it up yourself. Or you could also, I'm a bit biased, you could also use Widgetbook Cloud for that hosting part, and you do not need to worry about any setup or maintenance. We just do it for you. And basically, that's it. What you would do in the setup part of your design system. As I promised, we'll also talk about the maintenance of it. But to sum up what we learned about our design system, I would always encourage you, start with the design system in Figma, then do the design handoff in Figma dev mode, then build the Flutter design system with Widgetbook. You should mirror the naming from Figma to Flutter. You should follow atomic design, document your design system, and then share it with other stakeholders. And now, how do we maintain the design system? And usually, that's the part that's actually even more important. So there have been so many initiatives of teams that I saw that basically started to build a great design system from scratch, but then it really lacked maintenance for them. And then all the time and effort you put into it is in the end wasted. So you really need to make sure that you have a great process of maintaining your design system constantly. What is really important here? It's really important that you make sure that you always track all the changes that you make to your design system. And when you're making changes to the design system, those changes are in the end visual. And the question is, how do we prevent unintended UI changes? Because in the end, your end users, they really don't care how clever your code is written. They care about how does my app look and how does my app behave. And eventually, you will always change something existing, or you will extend your design system. And what you really need to make sure is, as a developer, that you do not accidentally break something. So what very often happens, you're changing, for example, a primary button on the home page. You just didn't know, but this primary button was also used on the profile page. And that's a change that you didn't want to ship. In traditional software development, you might have a case where you ship to staging and the QA tester finds it eventually, but sometimes these changes also slip. And especially if you want to make sure that you are verifying your changes in all the different configuration options that you have, it's a lot of effort to test manually. Many of you might already think about golden tests here that could actually solve it. Who in this audience already used golden tests at some point? Okay, I'd say half of the room. Who is using golden tests right now? There. Yeah, okay, a bit less. For all of you who are not familiar with golden tests basically are visual UI regression tests. And what they do is you take a screenshot of the current version of your widget, and you then compare it with the next version of your widget, and then you run a regression test to basically, you kind of overlay those screenshots and thereby figure out if something changed, yes or no. Sounds great in theory, but unfortunately golden tests have issues. 4 main issues. The first issue is, as developers, we have to write them manually. Sucks, right? Quite cumbersome, time-consuming. Second issue is golden tests are quite flaky. So it really depends on what kind of operating systems you're using in your team. So might be the case I'm using macOS, Ben might be using Windows. We have a difference already, even though there should not be a difference. Or I could be using macOS in version A, Ben is using macOS in version B. There can also be a flakiness, even though it shouldn't actually be here. Issue number 3 is the golden tests are usually pushed to your repository, and then they clutter your repository. So something you really don't want to have. And issue number 4 is reviewing failed goldens is actually quite cumbersome. It's not an easy, not a nice developer experience. And that's why we decided to build Widgetbook Cloud. And I'd like to give you a live demo now of Widgetbook Cloud. I just need to quickly make sure that I can properly do it. So I start mirroring my entire screen here now. We are currently in GitHub, and it's important to understand we are not only supporting GitHub. So we're supporting whatever Git provider you're using. And we are currently in a pull request, and we made the following change. And that's something where GitHub really excels at. GitHub can show us exactly what code lines were changed, but what GitHub can show us is what changed visually. So what we changed here is the primary button. The question is, okay, what parts of my app were affected now by this change? And here we can now see some widgetbook checks. So basically you can include widgetbook in your pull request, and we then run automated checks for you that find out for you automatically if there were any visual changes. And if there were visual changes, we show them to you. So you can click on the widgetbook review link straight from GitHub, and then you can see a list of all of the changes that were done in this pull request. And we can start by the source, and that is the primary button here. So this primary button was changed, and we can see on the left side, that's how the widget looks before. On the right side, we can see that's how the widget looks right now. And as we can see, other parts of the app were also affected by this change. In this case, this page here. And in a page or in a more complex widget, sometimes not so easy to see exactly what changed. And that's why you can always toggle the difference to see highlighted for you exactly what changed. And you also have the option to compare the Flutter implementation to the Figma design. You would also have the option to always see the entire widgetbook build, to test your widgets easily in all the different configurations, so the different knobs and add-on configurations that we already talked about. But you do not need to test it manually. You can also test it automatically. So we here, for example, defined that we want to automatically test all our changes in a few different configurations. So we, for example, defined we would like to test all configurations in English language, in German language, in dark mode, and in light mode. And then basically this set of changes can then be automatically tested for you. And you can then, very, very, very similar to a code review in GitHub, can then decide if you want to accept the changes or if you want to reject the changes. If you'd like to write a comment, you can choose to either comment exactly under the change, as you would with the code line in GitHub or other Git providers, or you could also just write a general comment, or could also write no comment. I mean, I'm from Germany, so in Germany usually we never say you did great work here, so we would just approve, and only when we don't like something, then we would request it and give you very harsh feedback, right? So if I'm happy, I would just approve, no comment. And once that's done, the check in GitHub turns green, and we are then allowed to safely merge with confidence. And as a developer, you can then really be sure that you do not ship any unintended changes to your users. I know we have a designer as well in the audience, and we can actually give you a lot of power with this tool as well. So I don't know for what company you're working, but if you're working for a large enterprise, we've seen it very often so in the end with Widgetbook, you can configure reviewers that are mandatory here to review. And especially in larger organizations, they give some power to the designers here, where they're like, okay, at least one designer is a mandatory reviewer here. So if you are in the end not happy with any change, like my colleague Jens here is, Jens basically said, no, I reject it, even though Julius and me, two developers, were like, okay, we're for it. But basically see here now on GitHub again, no way I can merge this pull request because the designer didn't like it. That's an option that is especially useful for larger teams to make sure that the designers are involved in the process as early as possible. But in case you're working for a smaller team, no worries, you don't need to include a designer here. You can also just use it. Either you as a developer who created this pull request, you can make sure that I understand all of my visual changes, or you can use it as the reviewing developer to basically understand what are the visual changes that my team now introduced. And with that, back to the presentation. Yes, there we go. So I'd like to sum up what we just learned about the maintenance part of the design system and Widgetbook Cloud here by comparing the traditional development process and testing process with the new development and testing workflow that I would propose here. So in traditional development, you usually start with the design in Figma. We then hand it over to the developer who implements it. Then you have a code review. After the code review, you merge it. It's getting pushed to a staging environment where the QA tester tests it, and then it's being deployed and finally released. We have some problems here in this process. First of all, as a developer, very often I have no clue what visually changed. And that's why it's quite difficult for me to tell the QA tester exactly what they should review. So what's happening then with the QA tester? They just end up testing everything. And they do not even need to do it. And because they are sometimes then overwhelmed with stuff they should test, things just slip. And even if we are able to tell the QA tester kind of, okay, that is what you should focus on, the QA tester usually has to fire up different testing environments. He needs to make sure to, or she needs to make sure to quickly test everything on different device sizes, different themes, different languages, text scale factors, all of that. And as we've seen with Widgetbook, that process can actually be sped up a lot. And the designer ends up being quite frustrated because, as you see here, the designer is most often not included at all in this process. And the designer is then only pinged at some point because someone sees it in the release and is like, "Did you design this?" And the designer is like, "No, I didn't. The developer just built it that way." So it leads to some frustration with the designers, and for the customers, it can lead to bad UI UX because some UI bugs might be introduced. And bad UI UX can lead to churn for your app or less retention. And then basically the entire point of why you built this app is questioned. And with Widgetbook Cloud, we give you the opportunity to shift left in the development process. What I mean with shifting left is it's basically a concept that allows you to move testing development processes left, so basically earlier in the process. So you're basically testing as early as possible during development. And what you can see here is you still design in Figma, you still implement as a developer, but while you're doing the developer, so the code review, you're also doing the design review in Widgetbook. And in case there's a change that you want to have your developers done now, it's also a lot quicker to do this change because the widget was just built. It is not already part of some big staging app. At this point, you can really iterate very, very quickly until everyone is happy, until everyone approved it, and until you can then be sure as a developer, perfect, what I merge now does definitely have no unintended changes. And that's the end of my presentation. If you'd like to share this information with your team, I wrote a very detailed article. It goes even more into detail than the talk that I gave because limited time, obviously. So feel free to scan this QR code to find the article, share with your team, and if you'd like to talk to us in person. Oh no! Oh no! How did that happen? Yeah, it was 3 slides. It was the entire development process. But good that you mentioned it. I know why it didn't work. It was my screen mirroring. But I mean, the good thing is, I already told you, right, that it's still not working. Nice, we're back. So basically, if you want to still see the last 2 slides, they are quite nice. Basically, that was the traditional development process, and that's the new one. And you can find all of this information also in the article. Just scan the QR code, and if you'd like to talk to us in person, we have a booth downstairs, and we'd be very happy to help you with anything. I hope you scanned it. Nice.